Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. Welcome to It's Not You, It's Me, Breaking Up with Xibs and Storyboards. Tonight, I'm going to talk about how instead of using storyboards and Xibs in your iOS app to describe how your views look, you can instead express those same constraints and same layouts programmatically in Swift or Objective-C. Just a quick agenda about tonight. So I'm going to kick off tonight by just talking about a few of the advantages of doing your layout programmatically. After that, I'm going to go through the available layout methods you can use programmatically and kind of give you my opinion, what I think is best and which ones you probably don't want to use. After that, we're going to just implement like a really simple view controller programmatically, and just get it shipped. After that, I'm going to just point out a few things you can do to make your life easier. There's some ways you can write your own extensions, and you can use some third-party tooling that really saves time and helps you out. And lastly, of course, I'm going to leave time for questions and most likely comments. But before we get started, just a little bit about me. So as Steve mentioned, my name is Doug Suriano, and I am currently iOS Engineering Manager at HotelTonight. For those of you who don't know about HotelTonight, it's a mobile-only booking app. We're on iOS, Android, mobile web. We're located right here in beautiful San Francisco. We are around 6 years old at this point, and we're one of the first mobile OTAs. In the beginning, HotelTonight was only same-day hotel bookings. A few years back, we've expanded to 7 days. And later this month, we're going to expand actually up to 100 days in select markets. So our app is, fully native, Objective-C Swift, and of course, exclusively programmatic layouts. If you need a hotel, booking style, pizza parties, my promo code, $25 off your first booking. And I'm hiring iOS engineers, so if you need a job, hit me up after the show. So sweet, let's dive in. Let's talk about some of the advantages, or let's start with rather what I think some of the advantages are of doing your layout programmatically. So I'm going to touch on just 4 of them. There's probably more, but these are the 4 that I feel pretty strongly about. First is constants. Second, code reviewability. Swift, and finally project scalability. So across most programming languages, it's really good practice to never use a magic number. It's a huge code smell. So what's a magic number? Well, let's say we were checking for a particular error code. We wouldn't write this. What does 612 mean? Is that something I need to memorize or look up? Instead, we would do something like this, where we would declare a constant, saying what the error is, so we know exactly when we're looking at it what this does. This way our code is self-documenting and easier to parse. So when it comes to layout, we also want to avoid magic numbers. So that means the values that we use for spacing, padding, your edge insets, these should all be constants. This is nice because as users go to different parts of your app, the UI is going to feel consistent and familiar. And in iOS, since we do a lot of front end, I would also add to that list that your colors and your fonts should also be constant values. For example, if in the middle of your code base, I saw someone doing something like this, like a UI color, red, green, blah, 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 or a font, I would consider that a pretty good code smell. Instead, we would want to declare these values once in our code base and use a constant getter to represent those values. And on the plus side, this is even more readable. I know exactly by looking at this UI color or this font what we're getting out of this. So here's the problem, is that when we go there using our Xibs and Storyboards, we can't access these constant values we declare in our code base. Let's just take a look at what we actually can do inside Xibs or Storyboards. So for our spacing, insets, all that stuff, they're not there. All we have is we can manually edit our values in our view inspector in interface builder. But let's say you want to change all of your edge insets to be 8 on the left and 8 on the right, and they're 10 everywhere else. You have to go manually to each Xib or storyboard and change those values. That doesn't sound like any fun to me. For colors, actually, Apple threw us a bone. They gave us a new color syntax at DubDub this year. So this is kind of cool. Allows you to declare colors in your asset catalogs and then use them inside your code and inside storyboards. There's one downside if you have Objective-C in your code base. I'm sure some of you guys still do. You can't use Objective-C. Okay, I'll give them that. And for fonts, if you use San Francisco as your font and use dynamic text, you're good. But if you're like HT and you use a custom font, you're no good. So I really do think though that like the ability of having constants available in your programmatic layouts is a huge win over storyboards and divs. Next up, code review. So another really big belief of mine as an engineer is that if you work with at least one other iOS engineer, you should require that every change to your code base go through code review. Getting your code reviewed makes you a better engineer, and even more so when you're reviewing other engineers' code, it makes you a better engineer. I mean, I can personally say that some of the best code I've ever written has because I got some comment or some question on a PR that led me to think a different way or reevaluate why I'm doing something that way. I really believe that no engineer is above code review. So I don't care if it's your first day as an iOS engineer or you've been like programming Objective-C since the 80s. Like you can become a better engineer just by making sure that your code's been reviewed and you're reviewing other people's code. Whoops. Oops. Oh, sorry. Weird presenter view. Okay. But so I gotta be blunt though. When it comes to interface builder, it's a lot easier for iOS engineers to review Objective-C or Swift than XML. No, I know oftentimes view code is really boring, but view code, especially like layout constraint, can have some real performance implications in your code base. And by expressing that stuff programmatically, your colleagues can help you catch things earlier and ship more confidence. You can also ensure that your code style is consistent and that all your views are lined up correctly. And the fact that you can't use a tool like GitHub to really, code review like interface builder files is a huge drawback at using interface builder. So next up, Swift. Everyone's somewhat favorite new language. So for once now, as iOS engineers, a compiler is looking out for us. In Objective-C, if I have a string with string and I'm passing in a NS number. Here in Objective-C, this is just a warning. Go ahead, do this, YOLO. But, in Swift, on the other hand, if I do the exact same syntax, this is a compiler error and it's gonna catch this stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Objective-C. I think it's a great language, a lot of fun. But, but with this gives you a little bit more, ability to ship quality crash-free code. And like, I really appreciate that about Swift, that it really is easier so you don't shoot your foot off. But like, unfortunately though, IB is really a product of Objective-C. It dates back to Next. You can actually go on YouTube and like find videos of Steve Jobs demoing IB in the early 90s. Like for example, if you rename your IB function in Swift code, but you don't go back to your xib or storyboard, that's a crash. The compiler is not gonna save you. You can't do nullability with IB outlets, and you might be thinking, well, that's how it's always been, so that's not so bad. But to me, like, if you're gonna embrace your Swift compiler everywhere else in your code base, your view controllers, your network stack, your model layer, but then you're not gonna embrace the compiler in the code your customer is gonna interact with in C, that just doesn't really make any sense to me. Next up, or rather, lastly, scalability. As your team grows, programmatic layout code is gonna scale better with your team's growth. If you have every view in one storyboard, your team of 4 engineers would be in merge conflict hell. Like in HD, for example, we often have 4 parallel features being working at the same time. Now, yes, you're right. Like Apple allows you to split up storyboards, but like that means your team has to find time to like do that refactoring and retest. And when deadlines are tight, good luck going to your CTO being like, sorry, we can't ship this because we got to rewrite our storyboard file. It's probably not going to happen. So I really do think that like using programmatic layouts more easily enforces separation concerns. And of course, merge conflicts I think are also easier to resolve. So there are some of the advantages I think of using programmatic layouts over IB. So next up, let's choose a layout method. All right, so for most non-game projects, you have 4 options. You have manual layout, auto layout with UIKit, auto layout using a third-party SDK, or custom layout outside UIKit. So let's just take a look at these options in closer detail. For the first 2, we're going to just draw a simple UI view. It's going to be 100 points wide, 70 points tall, and then 10 from the leading edge and 10 from the top edge. So manual layout, really, really simple. We create the view, we add it to our super view, and then we set the frame. At the next layout pass, iOS is going to put this at 10, x10, y10, width 100, height 70. That's it for basic views. So right off the bat, advantages of manual layout is, damn, this is easy. It's great. For simple views, All you gotta do is put my XY with height, it's great. And since it's close to metal, you're gonna get pretty fast performance generally with manual layout. Another thing I really like to say about manual layout is that it matches the language that your designers are mostly gonna express their specs in. You know, when you're in Sketch or anything like that, you know, designers are gonna be laying stuff out with X, Y, with height. So it's pretty close and maps one-to-one pretty closely. It's easy to kind of communicate design changes and stuff like that. And there's a lot of flexibility. There are no rules, no anything like that. It's the Wild Wild West. Of course, this leads to the disadvantages pretty quickly. It's a lot of code to make stuff work like multiple screen sizes, dynamic text, iPad multitasking. Another big one is your sizing logic. Size that fits is going to be different often from your layout logic. This really sucks a lot. Because what happens is that like you'll update your layout logic, but you forget to update your size that fits call. And then suddenly your layout will look really weird on some stuff. It could be a mess. And then because we have to support all these different features, like your layout code quickly becomes really complicated. And because of that, it's really easy to write bad layout code. So Apple saw this and they were like, folks, we got you. And they called something called auto layout. So it's gonna be pretty good. And actually Apple has given us, is everyone here familiar with auto layout? Well, just in case you're not. It's basically a higher level abstraction on top of manual layout. So instead of defining your views as X, Y with height, you're describing your views in relationship to other views and how they should position themselves inside the view hierarchy. And then we have three options for programmatic auto layout. First up is visual format language. Second, NSLayoutConstraint. And lastly, NSLayoutAnchor. So let's just compare all three programmatically. So first one, we got visual format language here. So we start off easy. We make our view. We then translate auto-resizing master constraints. No, add it to the view. Then we do this kind of cool Objective-C voodoo trick called NSDictionary of variable bindings, which what it does is it takes that variable name we pass in, and it creates a dictionary with has a key of my view and the value my view. It's great. I love that method. And then we make our constraints, and our constraints are pretty much defined as these strings here. So we just break them down. That H is horizontal, that pipe is your leading edge, and then I'm saying I want space of 10, and I want my view then to be 100 points wide. And then same thing vertical, that's that top edge, 10 points, my view 70, and then I add those constraints. But like for me personally, I don't know, this API, not my favorite. I don't really want to be hung over at 9:30 trying to decipher a string to see why my layout's fucked up. So instead, Apple has given us a more strongly typed API. NSLayoutConstraint. So let's just scroll down here. Okay. Whoa, okay. Well, this is great. It's descriptive. So let's just walk through it. We got a leading constraint, top constraint, with height. So if you had to write this for every single layout thing, you would drive yourself crazy. This is a lot of code. So this one, it's more type safe, it's more expressive, but you don't want to do this. So thankfully, Apple listened to us in iOS 9. They gave us layout anchors. Finally, these are nice. This is a great, clean API, very easy. It's a little longer than manual layout, but still, it's concise enough that's easy to read and easy to grok. So auto layout for me, there's a couple advantages. The biggest one for me, I think, is that it's really that your sizing and your layout code lives in the same place. When we converted a lot of HotelTonight's views to auto layout using anchors, it was great. I could delete all those size that fits calls in my UI views, and it was great to get rid of all that code. We shed thousands of lines of code with that auto layout switch. And then also when you got auto layout going, stuff like resizing on iPad, dynamic text, multiple screen sizes, they really just come out of the box. If you set your constraints up correctly, everything kind of works. And finally, I got called layout anchors. It's a pretty good API. But of course, like everything in life, there's some disadvantages. To me, auto layout is a DMV of UIKit. It is a very unforgiving API. If you didn't set translates to auto-resize mask to false, back of the line. You didn't activate your constraint, it's not going to be there. It's very unforgiving. So if you don't give it the exact right inputs, stuff is not going to work. You compare that to manual layout where, stuff might not look correctly, but it will still be on the screen. So it can be very, very frustrating when you're trying to debug or trying to figure stuff out. You also have to kind of shift your thinking. So you get a spec from designer, and you kind of convert all this stuff to constraints. And that's not super hard, but for me what's hard is having to convert that back into designer speak. So when you're in that design review meeting and they're saying like, why can't we move this over 5 points? It's kind of hard to explain, layout, like compression resistance, all this other stuff. So it's really kind of hard sometimes to do those communications and do that. So, and still confusing error handling. It's a giant thing in your terminal. It's like, I don't even know. And then poor performance. If you're on like a scrolling list, you have a lot of constraints, it can be slow as hell. So there are some other options. So one is using a third-party framework. These like masonries, SnapKit, cartography, and most of these aim to fix auto layout, especially that VFL approach and the NSLayoutConstraint approach. Here's some just their suggested syntax. That's masonry. I think that's SnapKit and that's cartography. Very nice. And a lot of them now are actually really kind of Swift inspired and have very, very nice syntaxes. So your last option with like layout is to just replace UIKit. That could be Async Display Kit, Layout Kit. These are like frameworks backed by large corporations, and they're normally trying to fix something that was wrong with UIKit. So let's just talk about what I recommend. I recommend auto layout with layout anchors. It's really great, and despite all those disadvantages, auto layout is still the best way to support all the devices and features in iOS. Manual layout, I still recommend it when needed. Sometimes you need to get that extra performance, like let's say you have a table view with really complicated cells, and you need to make sure it scrolls well. Auto layout, or rather manual layout, should still be a tool in your toolbox. Auto layout with third-party libraries, I don't recommend them anymore. I think layout anchors have really saved the day and really have made those libraries unnecessary today. And I think you're much better off served by sticking closer to UIKit and avoid using a third-party library like that. And finally, the custom layout, I don't recommend using that. 99% of our apps are best suited with UIKit. If you work at like a large corporation and you have 50, 70, 100 iOS engineers, this might be a different discussion. But if you're in a team of 1 to 4 engineers, I think you're much better off by sticking with UIKit, and you'll get pretty far. All right, here we are. Let's build a view controller. All right, I'm excited. Okay, so what are we building? We're building a details page for a shopping app, HotelTonight. It's details, calling it Burrito Details View Controller. Looking at this is a spec our designer gave us. So we need, looks like an image view, 2 labels, a UI button. Yeah, that's it actually. And we're going to use layout anchors. All right, so here we go. So first off, we're going to make our new view controller. Okay, we're going to make sure we uncheck the xib. That's important. All right. Sweet. Next up, let's just do a bit of cleanup on this view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a burrito property here, and I'm going to make an initializer to init this burrito. The burrito is a model layer, it's a struct. And then I'm going to just create my custom initializer. All right, do a few more things and add that. Okay, great. There we go. Easy enough here. Okay, now finally let's do this one last part here, and let's hook this up to our menu view controller, which is a table view controller. So let me implement self row or deselect row index path. Deselect that. Get my burrito from my array of burritos. Create my view controller. And then just add it as a view controller on the navigation stack. And then let's run this app here, and let's make sure everything's working. All right, so we tap into that. Boom, we have our empty view controller. We are good to go. This is progress. So next up here, now we're going to add some views. So view controllers, as you know, have very specific view lifecycle methods. I don't want to create all my views in my init method. Instead, what I want to do is I want to create and add my subviews only when the view has fully loaded. And we know that happens because UI view controller will call view did load. So let me just declare my properties here that I'll use later on in view did load. So yeah, just do that. Okay. Okay, cool. Looks good, right? Wrong. Okay, remember guys, friends don't let friends force unwrap properties. I always avoid writing implicitly unwrap optionals. If you see an exclamation point, that's bad. Do not do it. So let's just do this a little better. And let's instead of doing that, let's instead use a lazy var. There we go, much better. See, even better. So you just save yourself a comment on a PR. So perfect. Next up, okay, so now let's set up our subviews. So for each view, I'm going to set the properties on it and then add them to the view controller's view. I'm doing this in view did load. Just a couple of things to note that as I'm doing this. If you notice that, I'm going the same order as my properties to setting them up, and my order of my properties matches what my view looks like. So my image view is on top, that's the first property. Then I have my title label, details label, and button. And I do this as a style, but I think this really helps you out when you're kind of, writing your view code that it just reads from top to bottom. And makes it really easy when you're trying to go back in this file a couple months later that you understand like where stuff is and where it lives. So I'm gonna keep updating the stuff. Sweet, okay, so we got those set up. Okay, now the fun stuff. Now let's add some layout constraints. Similar to this, I'm gonna, I'm gonna transform my order as a mask to false and add the constraints. I also like to follow the same order at each constraint. So what I like to do is go counterclockwise. So I do top, trailing, bottom, leading, then I do width and height. And I try to keep that the same every single time. I edited this out so you don't have to view this whole thing. So let me run it. And here we go, we got a view, we got like constraints, no nibs, no storyboards, looking good. All right, but you might have noticed that I didn't do some good programming here. I'm using all magic numbers. So let's fix this. I'm gonna do a file private struct up here. Declare, some constants. So I'm not using magic numbers all over my layout code. Everything's nice and consistent. Then go through it. I'm gonna refactor all this stuff. Okay, and then boom, later, all fixed, edited. Great, this is looking a little better. So here we are. We have a programmatic view-based view controller. But I gotta be honest, I think this is pretty ugly. I'm not too happy. Like I've committed view did load abuse. I have made this massive view did load method. This view controller is really simple now, but now my view did load method's what, 100 lines, even more? I don't want to ship like this, and you probably wouldn't want to ship like this either. So we have a couple options to break this up. One would be to extract this into different methods. So for example, I could have a setup subviews method and do all my subview logic, and then do a setup constraints method, move all my constraints there. But I'm just kind of masking the problem. I'm still going to have a massive view controller with everything in this one concern. And I think that, and as I said, this is simple for now. If I start adding more functionality, this will become a massive 1,000-long controller. So I think there's actually better stuff I can do here. And one thing I really like to do is I like to actually break up my view controller and view into two separate classes. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to now create a new file, which is just this BDR burrito details view. And I'm going to just put some shellcode in here. Okay, and now I'm going to move all my views into this view here. And I'm going to make this new view a lazy var here. And then I'm going to implement load view in UI view controller. I'm going to set my view property to be this lazy var. Great, and then I'm going to do some more editing. And then finally, So now, if I look at my view controller on my view, I have all my view controller stuff in my view controller, and then all my view code is now in its own view stuff, in its own class, in its own separated module. This is my personal preference for doing programmatic view controllers. I think this is like a nice way to split up concerns, and it just makes your code, I think, a little bit easier. Next up here is making your life easier. There's a few things you can do to make programmatic layout easier day to day. The first one is, of course, extensions. Now, earlier in this talk, you heard that I like sticking closely to UIKit. However, remember, UIKit's built on Objective-C, which allows you to extend functionality of classes without subclassing easily in both Swift and Objective-C. This isn't like method swizzling. This is something that Apple encourages you to do, and is a very, very good design pattern. And what I like about this is that it's kind of best of both worlds. It allows you to stick close to the metal, but it allows you to slightly optimize based on your project's needs. So let me just do a few examples of stuff I like to do. First off is translating your autoresizing mask to false. So what I like to do is write a quick little UI extension on UIView, and then boom, instead of this, I now create that method that says enable auto layout. What I like about this is that this is a little more friendly with autocomplete. So instead of having to do like translates, and then select it from the menu and says equals and false, I can just do E and A and say enter. And it's really quickly when you're doing those set up for auto layout. Next one up in a similar vein is activate. So this kind of gets pretty ugly pretty quickly. You're doing a bunch of layout anchors. Then you have to end it with is active true. So instead, let's make another extension here on NSLayoutConstraint where we say activate. And this is also similar, same way. It's just, I think, a little nicer API and also more friendly with autocomplete. So those are two basic ones, but we can go more complex. So let's say we had in our app, we always were pinning stuff to the top of a view. We always had a top anchor, a trail anchor, and a bottom anchor, or rather a leading anchor. And we did this over and over again. We're free to write like a UI, write an extension on UIView, like fix the top edges. Where I'm using my past stuff I did in my previous extensions to create something like this. And then, so when I'm doing this again, I'm not rewriting the same code over and over again. And what I like about this approach too is you can notice I'm using, I'm using my extension alongside Apple UIKit call. So it's very kind of friendly and it's good and makes your life easier. Next thing advice is make sure you invest in a good view debugger. Xcode has one built in, but I much prefer the commercial options, Reveal or Spark Inspector. I'm personally a Reveal fan, so let me just show you this in this burrito app here. So I'm gonna load it up here, and then we're gonna just go to details and load Reveal. This gives us our everything gives us our constraints, and I can edit constraints kind of here. You can notice they update in the simulator as we go along. So this is great if you really like Interface Builder for that visual feedback and sitting with your designer. You can kind of mimic the same thing and similar functionality using a good view debugger. One last thing is don't forget UIStackView because it's easy as hell. It saves a lot of time. It's less lines of code. It's really, really easy to use UIStackView, and I recommend using it for a lot of your stuff. So that's it, actually, for my talk here. I hope it was useful and entertaining. I put all the slides. I put the slides on this demo project on a GitHub page. Go there, Breaking Up Talk. Follow me on Twitter at Suriano. And yeah, that's my promo code for HotelTonight. And just want to open up the floor for questions. Oh yeah, let me put the GitHub page up. So there you go.
We'll tweet the link too.
What's up?
So I follow a lot of the same patterns for building with auto layout, like separating out the view controller, stuff like that. One challenge I've run into with auto layout is reflow. And Apple has admitted that reflowing entire views is kind of difficult. And do you have a strategy?
Could you go into more detail what you mean by reflow? I'm not sure I follow exactly.
So say on one case in our app, we have on iPad the buttons are side by side, and on iPhone they're stacked.
Yes. No, I don't have a good strategy at all. I mean, the strategy I would do is, and the question, I'm sorry, I'm pretty bad at this, is that do you have any strategies for reflow, like dealing with between iPhone and iPad? I would probably lean, like HC, we have some internal macros that I know we shouldn't use, but we do sometimes, like devices iPad versus devices phone, which is not elegant. Sometimes we look at the size class can also help, but no, I don't really have a really good strategy. I think that's just kind of the side effects of having all these multiple screen sizes and devices. What's up, Nick?
Yeah. You mentioned that it's difficult to communicate with designers when you're using auto layout because it's a super complicated algorithm and everything that's sort of black magic. So how do you get around that in your day-to-day?
So the question is, how do you get around explaining to designers about auto layout? It's just hard. I mean, I find that oftentimes it's kind of, you have to disappoint. You kind of have to kind of be firm that like, hey, we don't, like doing UI in iOS is not Sketch. We can't just move everything in some white space or like area. We have to worry about different screen sizes. We have to worry about multiple things that can happen to the OS. Using a tool like Photoshop or Sketch is different from actually doing real UI work. So that's just kind of like, you just have to kind of like beat that drum as much as possible, I find. And then, eventually you win the fight. What's up?
Hey, thanks for your talk. Yeah, do you use Reveal though? Because it sounded like you use that to sort of work with a designer to tune.
So the question is, do I use Reveal to work with designer to tune? I mostly use Reveal to debug. I use Reveal to kind of see what's going on. If I have a constraint that's not showing up, I use that. If I have a troublesome view that I don't know why it's appearing or what's going on, I use Reveal. I actually pretty rarely ever use that to work with the designer. But for the most part, I use Reveal as kind of like, there's something wrong with this view. I don't know what it is. Let me load this up and see what's going on.
So do you have people who came to work on the project that were big fans of using a visual tool like Interface Builder that had trouble converting, and how did it go after that?
Have we ever had people who have been fans of using Interface Builder join our team, and then how did that go? We haven't actually, and might be because we have a code challenge that clearly states that we don't use Interface Builder. I have found for the most part, iOS engineers that at least that I've come across with tend to be side with the programmatic layout crowd, and that just might be me. But yeah, I have very rarely met someone who's a very, very strong advocate for using IB in a big production app.
Question: have you ever used the layout margins and try to pin stuff to margins as opposed to having all these magic constants everywhere? And second question is, what do you do about the hugging and compression resistance? I didn't see that anywhere in your code.
That's right. Okay, so good thing. Have I ever used the layout margins for doing instead of magic constants? Yes, I have. I just didn't put in this one. Just kept talk simple. And I didn't touch content compression or hugging resistance. Generally, what I do also though is I like to add a few little extensions as well to kind of help out with setting those values and stuff like that. But and also one thing I do to kind of resolve that is just having a couple extensions to help out. But yeah, definitely use the stuff Apple gives you. It's there to help.
So do you just have one do not swish text and it sets it to 1,000, or what's your example?
No, I would more do something that just is a slightly easier way to set a layout priority or a compression resistance, so you can use it inside. You can kind of group into one line. I have to think of top of the head. It's
okay.
But yeah, something more like that. I would be a little bit wary so I should state that I believe in using extensions to help you out. But you shouldn't deviate too far from Apple stuff, because if you do that, then you're just going to end up writing a third-party auto layout thing. So for me, I should be clear that I think the best approach is to write a really thin layer that's kind of still pretty close and still feels within it, using layout margins, but not go over the top and write something that's pretty extreme.
To which role do you delegate the responsibility of dealing with animations?
So to which view do I dedicate
You
animations?
got a controller and you got a view.
Typically, I do. This could be. Let's see. Typically, I've been doing controller. And I know. I've done both. I'll tell you the truth. I don't really think I have the right answer, right? Like, I think I have to look at the code in place and see where it makes the most sense. Because oftentimes it will make sense to me to view, right? But sometimes if your animation is like, let's say, contingent on some stuff coming back from the server or stuff like that, I don't want to put that logic into a view and all that. So my answer would be I would case by case. And yeah, like on paper, yes, the view probably makes the most sense, but there's times when in the controller can make sense as well. And I mean, and honestly, also too, just to like point out that the view controller and view splitting that up is not the perfect solution because you lose stuff, for example, like size classes. That's not available in UI view. You don't have stuff like top layout guide. You have to do some kind of weak dance to like get your top layout guide in your view, which can be pretty gross as well. So there is very good reason to keep your view code inside your view controller because you get everything. But in cases where you can extract it, I think there's also big wins for that. What's up?
So I've tried really hard to use IB as much as possible, but you're always fighting it. But like two things I'm interested in from your perspective. When you start doing everything with code, do you find that it's possible to segment out view controllers and views into separate frameworks? So you can, say you did have a team of 30 developers or 100 developers like LinkedIn or whatever, where they have a lot of people. You think that would help with that? But then also when it comes to navigation, what is supposed to be good with the segues is you can unwind back to the starting point potentially. Do you have a strategy for how you do that, navigation?
So for the first question, like splitting stuff into frameworks, I think I would agree that would make sense for larger teams for sure to split that stuff up. But I would also always caution against premature optimization when it comes to that. I think that like a lot of people on iOS get pretty bored pretty quickly. They want to kind of like reinvent the wheel as quick as possible because we're doing front end work sometimes and cannot be as fun. But so I think for a large enough team that might make sense, right? But like if you're a small 3 to 4 person team, I might question that approach. Though I wouldn't want to make that judgment unless I saw like what was implied and all that. And as far as to like the unwinding to a segue, I guess that case there would be, let's say you were 4 view controllers deep and you want to get back to your root view controller, but you want to pass data back to your root view controller. Yeah. So I'm trying to think how I would solve that. I would say okay. So that I think that's a win for the storyboard model for sure. You have that built into the framework. And top of my head, I wouldn't know really what I would do, but I'm sure I would figure something out. I don't want to commit to anything because top of my head, I can't really think of something right now. But I will say this: like nibs and storyboards are not all bad. Like there's very very valid uses. There's really really good things that they do. If you're a one-person shop and you're trying to just get stuff done, you can crush and you can get a lot of work done. So for me, I would say like in everything in programming, it's always a trade-off. So you're just kind of comparing trade-offs. What's up?
Hey. So I've pretty much been an advocate of everything that you said in here. That's pretty much how I learned how to do stuff, and I specifically stayed away from IB for years and years and years. Only because I only saw it blew up with people like in source control and sharing, things blowing up, and so I've always only done stuff in code. But I'm also speaking as a somewhat recent convert to IB.
Nice.
But basically, I was going to say what you just said, which is that AIB has gotten a lot better, and it is good for certain things. But again, I'm having kind of learned everything in code. There are some advantages that I've found to IB, which I really appreciate now, which are a couple of things, which is I used to really like having all my layout code in code. And when I'd share something with someone, it's like I could see it, I could read it, we could code review, all that stuff. But on super, super, super massive apps, it just got to be like code reviews would be massive amounts of lines of code, and it almost got to the point where I would take someone's stuff to review it, and I feel like I was like mentally debugging their layout code, and it shouldn't be that hard. Now, again, if there's a problem, right, you can't see it in the nib and all that stuff. So I agree with you. But I will say the things I've learned to love about IB are the separation from that, and also IB being better now, just being able to tap through constraints and see the icons. It's a lot better than it used to be.
I mean, I will say that I think Apple has shown a commitment that's pretty nice. Where every single year, where they've given us IB designable, IB inspectable, they've given us, I mean, the tooling has improved, and you cannot deny that. And that team, kicks ass every single year, dub with the new features. I will say, just as like a kind of a kumbaya type thing, is that like you should not take your advice on what you should do for your project from a talk, but rather what you should do is you should serve your customers, right? And you should choose a method to serve your customers the best way. And if that is using Xibs and Storyboards, and you can ship features to your customers faster, then do that. But if you find that that the tooling is getting in the way, that's slowing you down, then consider alternatives. So I mean, and for that, I personally think programmatic layouts are the way to go. But I'm just one person, and I hope that also that maybe one day I will be a convert too, if IB is the better solution.
I haven't converted to actual full-blown storyboards with navigation yet, because those still seem to blow up in certain cases, like sharing files and stuff.
Yeah.
But like for certain cases, nibs and auto layout that way, I've grown to love a little bit. But I'm glad I can do it the other way, right? I'm glad I can go back and do.
Yes, and it's always important also, another kumbaya, be a well-rounded iOS engineer, know about all your options, don't be closed-minded, and just try to, try to do that.
It's actually a response to the code review piece of it. In my team, we've recently embraced Facebook's screenshot test framework for unit tests.
We also use those at HT as well.
Are really amazing for layout code reviews, because you'll see, a big diff to the code that's involved, and then a pair of screenshots, the new and the old version of the layout. That if you're using Bitbucket, for instance, you can even scrub between the old and new version and see how it fixes or unbreaks otherwise the layout that you're looking at, and then the code reviewer just looks at the screenshots like, yeah, the code looks fine.
So we actually do even a more lo-fi approach to this at HT as well. Is that one thing we started doing a few months back? We made a rule that if you open a PR that has visual changes, you put a screenshot in the comment. That's a really just quick way of it means that you actually tested your code and you're not just YOLO. But this is also a way too that they can they can have that visual reference, which helps out too. Because you're right. Yes, XML is confusing, but also a wall of layout anchors is also pretty confusing.
Oh, and a really quick follow-up, especially if you're using this method of splitting up the view and the view controller, you can do a screenshot test pass on multiple screen sizes with only one sim. You just create a view, size it to the known screen sizes you're supporting, and then one pass in your snapshot test will produce 4 or now 5 screen sizes that you need to test.
All the way over there.
So when dealing with an app that's fully using constraints everywhere, is there anything you could share in terms of besides divvying up the controller with the views, is there any other ways you do to manage it organizationally? For instance, maybe create properties for all the constraints so you know which ones refer to which, and then deactivate and activate them at will.
Yeah, I know that definitely could get tricky, right? Because especially if you have really complicated views. So one thing I like to also really advocate for is make sure you break up your views into chunks and not put all your view logic in your view controller, right? If you can, put them in their own self-contained views. I'm a pretty big believer in that. A lot too, because now I've been also kind of in the eye for snapshot testing and stuff like that. But I think that's a nice way to break stuff up, is make sure your classes are as small as possible and do a single purpose. But I mean, let's also be honest too, that sometimes in iOS you're gonna have messy code. If you want your app to do kind of cool things and really go above and beyond, I hate to break to you, but things are gonna get messy. And we can always strive to have perfect clean code, but realistically it's probably not gonna happen, right? And I don't want to be a pessimist about this, but at the same time I think it's important to keep that in mind, So, we were focused on the stuff that matters and keep clean stuff and be as clean as possible. But sometimes stuff will get messy, and when you see opportunities to clean it up, definitely do it. But yeah, I think, I know that's not super helpful. It just breaks up into smaller files. It doesn't always really solve stuff, but I think that certainly helps. What's up?
Yeah, so typically, when you make the constraint decisions, right, when it gets out to code review, the reviewer may say, no, I totally disagree with this set of code, constraint decisions here. Do you do anything, does that turn out to be sort of operationally a problem where you do see disagreement? And if so, is there a process where maybe there's preliminary discussion about what that constraint organization should be?
So generally, the kind of mode I always operated by is that all comments on a PR in our code base have to be addressed. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't matter, just not for layout, but just for everything in general. And if you kind of just start enforcing that rule, and what I mean by addressed is that, either you say, you have to explain why, a good reason why, because oftentimes that might happen, right? Where you have some constraints, like someone looks at this as like, what are you doing, amateur? Like, this is terrible. But really, there's a good reason why you have to do something like that. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's a very valid reason why you can do it like this. So oftentimes, the PR is like, well, yes, I try this approach, but this, this is why I have to do this. Other times, I'll have to admit, I think sometimes it's good to kind of, this might be weird, but give other engineers on your team the win, right? If you have a culture of code review and stuff like that, sometimes people have their particular, ticks and they have their particular style stuff. And I think it's good to be as a team member is that you have to kind of be empathetic of that. And if it's over the top or bad, then that you need to kind of figure that out in in a meeting or something like that. But sometimes it's good, I think, teamwork, just give your teammate what they want and their wish. I kind of back to a kumbaya type approach, but I think that's kind of with working as a team, right? You make your own compromises so you can all come together to ship something hopefully pretty good. So
I was just one bad thing about storyboards and nibs that I have gotten bit on is in a large project with some legacy code, legacy nibs are not fun.
Oh yeah.
So legacy nibs from iOS 6 to 7 used to have a compatibility mode, and so those properties don't actually show up in the sidebar. They show up at a 6/7, and if you go in and change layout margins or something, Xcode will crash. So those don't age very well. So that's one.
So actually, I do have a confession. HG has one nib, which is our launch screen or whatever. But apparently it's one of those. Everyone was like, "Oh, they fixed that problem when you open it up and it doesn't make your repo dirty." But I guess we have one of those legacy nibs because we refused to open that file for so long that we open that file and instantly I'm and getting mad and going to get coffee and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely the upgrade path. I know people. If you look at some the older. Back in the day when IB was a separate thing and you could actually ship shareable code, all that stuff broke, so fair warning.
So what's your experience with localization? Is it all English that you're dealing with?
No, so HT is in FIGS, so French, Italian, German, Spanish. So what we do for luckily left to right languages, which is good. But so we for our string translations, we actually have a macro, or we have just rewritten NSLocalized string with description because that's really long to type. We actually have HTSTR, which is really short to type, and everyone knows what it means. And you pass in a key string and comment. I encourage everyone to do something like that because NSLocalized string with description is really long to type. So but definitely I would say that about storyboard nibs. It kind of does give you a nice interface for getting your translations in there and all that stuff. That's definitely a win for that. But I still think you can accomplish that pretty well programmatically, but you just have to take a few extra steps.
You touched on testing a little bit. Is there anything else about testing you think is different or notable?
I guess I didn't want to touch testing too much because it can be a very controversial topic, and I think I bit off already a pretty controversial topic tonight. So, but I mean, I would say probably with, certainly go the programmatic route, you can definitely make yourself more testable. I think a sin of iOS has always been that it's a very untestable kind of, environment to work in. Our friends who work in Ruby on Rails have RSpec and a very, very testable ecosystem. And Apple again has made great strides, and XC-Test is kicking ass and getting better each year. But it's still nowhere close to where RSpec or our Python friends have and all that stuff. So definitely with programmatic layouts, you could definitely doing stuff like dependency injection, just making sure your views are testable. Do simple stuff like FB snapshot test case. Great little tool to just quickly make screenshots of your views and store them in your repo. There's a lot of stuff you can do there. So certainly, I think the programmatic route has a lot of opportunities for that testability.
Do you do any of that? Do you do any DI?
We do. So for us, we do FB snapshot test casing. We don't have an automation suite currently. For QA we have manual QA and regression testing and stuff like that. But I'm looking into automate. But mostly our testing is evolved around unit tests, just traditional, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
Two quick ones. What about seeing your layout on multiple devices? Do you have a good way to do that as you're doing it? And also, have you tried activate constraints that takes an array of constraints and how that differs in performance versus activating each one?
So for the second one, using activate constraints the array versus just is active true, I do hear that's faster. I knew that we just did redesign recently, and we were kind of having a lot of trouble with activate constraints, stuff like that. And we kind of did some research, and we saw that using that is certainly faster. But it really comes down to kind of what's programmatically nice to use. So for me, I try to, when I'm writing stuff, I try to make it look nice at the beginning. And if I have to change stuff for performance reasons, then you go back, fire up instruments, let's see what's going on and let's see how we can improve it. So yeah, for sure. If you have a really complicated view, let's say you're a table view, lots of constraints, you might be, and you're doing some animations and you need to enable some constraints, disable some constraints. Definitely take advantage of those for sure. And the first question, remind me.
Different device sizes.
Oh, different device sizes. No, not a good approach. My approach has been to, traditionally right now is test on a 6 size device, and then be like, oh, everything's gonna be fine, and then throw it over the wall to QA, and then let them reopen the Jira bug. Joke, don't do that. Well, sometimes I do that, but no. I hear though that in Xcode 9 we can have multiple simulators. Is this true? Can we confirm? So that might fix itself, which I've been wanting for a while. I've been wanting to be okay, run this on an iPad, a 6, an SE. Let's see this all. Certainly, once again, nice advantage of Xibs and Storyboards is you can just now kind of change it and see how everything works. So,
how do you deal with performance issues with scrolling with auto layout?
Switch to manual layout? No. But first of course, check your transparency. Make sure you're not, blending a lot of alpha. Not blending a lot of layers, fire up instruments, make sure your time profiler, make sure you're using your performance right. There's not really a good right answer, but and making sure you're avoiding stack views. Unfortunately, stack views are great, but stack views do a lot of magic under the hood. So that's kind of high level of how but there's never a one type thing you can do. It's scrolling performance, it's scrolling performance. You gotta put the time in, and then you will get it. So,
one thing you didn't really kind of cover in the talk, but I think it's sort of implicit, is when you do things in code, you have a deeper understanding of how the views are interacting with each other. And so therefore, when you're intimately involved with that, you sort of attempt to do things you wouldn't do with a storyboard, because you would feel like that would be 3 days worth of work with storyboards. Do you ever feel like you're in that situation where you do a lot of really nice animations in HT, so it's...
Yeah, I certainly think that, one thing I really like about doing programmatically is you do have that deeper connection to what you're doing, and you really understand what's going on behind the scenes. And as far as the yearning to do additional stuff, yeah, I think too where programmatic layouts really shine was when you have really custom layouts, and also HT also really shines because all of our data is really transient. All of our images, all of our text, all that stuff comes from the server. So what we do is we render that. So kind of having, especially when you have that transient type data coming in and stuff like that, like, our interface builder files and all that stuff, they would be pretty sparse as is, not really descriptive, not really helping us out. And plus, when you're using, the more custom stuff and kind of pushing the limits of the HIG and stuff like that, yeah, for sure. I think, I think it is easier to kind of break off and kind of start like, going a little crazy and, doing things that probably you shouldn't do, but YOLO. What's up?
So you mentioned you don't do test automation, but do you do any accessibility? And if you do you just like add accessibility labels as you add UI elements?
I should clarify, we have done automation in the past. We just kind of now our suite, we've kind of sunsetted. So we have like our accessibility and stuff like that. And we have tags for some stuff. We're not perfect. It's something as like a team I really definitely want to get better at because that's super important. But yeah, I would just, for most of that stuff, just add it into the subviews. And we try to do a pretty good job and try to, keep them there as much as possible. But I think that's something that us as an industry, we can probably all get better at. So, yeah.
I really don't know the answer to this, but I bring it up in case someone here possibly knows. One thing we were trying to do is minimize our build times. And we had read, I don't know if it's true, but we had read that lazy actually increases the compiler time. So we got rid of our lazy. I can't really say it made a big difference, but we had heard that. So I totally agree with you with the exclamation points and all that stuff. But at some point, we opted to get rid of lazy because we hoped it would improve compile times. And I don't know if that's really. No.
Yeah, and as for me, that's a big frustration with Swift is that the problems with Swift is that we have this great compiler, right? So for me, if I have this compiler that's really powerful, I want to take advantage of it. And if I don't want to take advantage of it, then I just write Objective-C. It's fast. It compiles fast. I still kind of like it. But yeah, it hasn't bit me enough to say for sure. Yeah,
I don't know if honestly it made a difference.
So we ran into this lazy thing as well, and I think it's gotten fixed. I think in Swift 3.
That's what I thought it was.
So we got, and back then there was a workaround. So the performance degradation was related to the complexity of the expression of the initializer expression.
Yeah.
So if you just said actually run the static function to initialize the thing, then the performance degradation went to almost nothing. But anyway, it's gotten fixed since then, so it's not a problem.
Cool.
Oh yeah, sweet.
Quick follow-up to that, we don't bother with lazy for anything. I think the idea of loading a view lazily to begin with is a very old construct that dates back to the original iOS platform. I don't think in our app we have any view controllers that are instantiated without being put on screen immediately.
So this is also interesting too because
whether the lazy happens, at the end of your run loop or not.
And I tried to get some when I was doing this talk, trying to get some documentation about this, about the documentation of when in fact you should load your view, because UI view controller, I guess I always was under myth that you keep your initializers pretty sparse, and then you do the heavy lifting and video load and stuff like that. There's specific lifecycle methods, but I gotta be honest, I actually couldn't find any exact documentation stating this. So I would love to be proved wrong otherwise. But I also kind of think too, this is a problem with UI view controller in Swift, is that its UI view controller is built as an Objective-C class, right? Where in Swift, the initializer is your friend, and that's where we do your work, that's where you do your setup. But view controller is this weird thing where, because Objective-C has no concept of an implicitly unwrapped optional. You have a value, it's nil, okay, great, cool. But yeah, so I think this is just one of the pain points of UIKit when we go from Objective-C to Swift, and yeah. What's up, Nick?
Yeah, just to follow up on that or an addendum to it. We in our code base we actually wanted to specifically go for immutability. So we just cast them all to lets. We do all of our initialization as lets to ensure that you can't change a view once it's actually been created.
Which for sure, and I think in a perfect world, that's how it would be. I didn't mention this in the talk, but one of the nice things about going from the UI view controller to going to a UI view subclass is that I didn't have to use lazy bars in that view. Those are all lets because that's what really I want. In that view control details thing, I don't want that to be a var. It's I always want the title net label to be there. I don't want someone who's using my classes like flip that out or change that stuff like there. So yeah, for sure, like this is why like I kind of glossed over that, but for sure, like if you're using Swift, embrace Swift. It's great. Like really think about your types, think about what's mutable, think about what's immutable, and like really embrace that.
All right, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit.
Oh, God damn it.
What can Apple do to improve SB and IB so that you would actually start using them?
Okay, so I would say first, constants, better support for like declaring constants inside. I think that like I said, this like kind of asset catalog thing's kind of cool. Like maybe some kind of way if I can declare like a CG float or values like that, I might take a look there. What else? Thinking,
there's colors in core data now, right? I mean, that's weird, but I'm just...
Wait. Sorry, that took me a while to think. Colors and core data.
I mean, I'm just saying that I think that they're, instead of asset catalog, they're saying, oh, you can put these things in a store somehow. And I'm not agreeing with it.
Yeah. I don't, so, and for me, generally, I think I would have, let me just take a step back. What I really wanted to fix in iOS is I'm jealous of, this is going to be controversial, but I'm jealous of like the web world and the JavaScript world. When you're building UI, and you just do Command R and you see your changes. You do your UI, you just do your changes. It's not fun to do this whole like, let me make these changes, run, wait a minute, or maybe in other cases, multiple minutes, and then see your change and realize that you forgot to activate your constraints. Like that to me is what I want to change the most, is how can we improve this like, this constant like, UI change, update, UI change. And yes, in theory in IB, we shouldn't have to be reloading all the time, but then again, like if you have an app like us that's transient and getting data from the server, we need to see the real data coming in, all that stuff. So that's often what I really want to change, is that kind of like that. And let me think what else. Probably should have thought about this. This sounds like one of those things you should think about before you give a talk about like this topic.
Source control.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but maybe the signs are there. I mean, we now have first-class GitHub integration with Xcode 9. Yeah, 9. So maybe like Apple's definitely making like kind of strides there, and maybe there'll be a new way to, maybe they're going to partner with GitHub to do a better way to express, your nibs on storyboards or in PR. That'd be pretty cool. I will say this. I'm gonna keep a pretty open mind at subsequent WWDCs, and if one day they release something that's pretty cool, I will be the first person to try it, and the first person to say that you should definitely never listen to this talk ever again.
Just one follow up. Have you ever tried doing like a hybrid approach where you have a very minimal storyboard where it's just scaffolding, but then you can fill in additional details with code?
Yes, actually, that was kind of my approach, I think, for the most part, before I went straight 100% programmatically years ago, where I would have a pretty basic view controller or just very like substance things, and I really kind of like was trying to embrace like, because try to embrace like using the framework or whatever, using this is a cool technology. Like at the end of the day, I mean, I do remember like the first time I started with Objective-C, I thought nibs were pretty cool. Like it was like, what do you mean I don't have to write programming? I just like control click and whoa, look at this. This is pretty sweet. I mean, like like a lot of like Hello World style apps, like Mac apps. So like I guess like in the beginning, yeah, I definitely like there was like that, like my favorite book about like Objective-C is Aaron Hillgrass's Mac OS 10 programming. Like my ultimate favorite book, and I love he has a chapter where you build an app with like no code whatsoever, and it uses like bindings and might use core data. I forgot, but like his whole point is like, look, you building a full Cocoa app without any kind of code, and so that romanticized kind of like thing, I still think's pretty cool.
So one thing that you mentioned that you didn't like about the UI development lifecycle is having to run the app and see the changes take place.
Mm-hmm.
How have you, with the programmatic, that's like the worst case scenario when
Yes.
you have to run the app. Because IB has everything there and you can see when there's warnings or, not able to fully satisfy the layout.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you done to like make that lifecycle easier to just do Command R and see the screen that you're working on? Have you like really, or do you have to click through to the actual screen on that flow?
For the most part, I click through the screen. I know I've had people on my team have tried to shortcuts, like where you like, you go in your app delegate and you like make that view controller instantiate first.
Right.
I try to avoid that stuff because like I fear that I'm like gonna be like I'm gonna get it fixed and be like push, and then like and then like QA's gonna be like yeah, good job, reopen. So I try to avoid that kind of stuff. And generally I just have to say I kind of just bear it. And what I try to do as an engineer is just get a little bit more deliberate about when I'm writing my layout code. Because I find it takes me a lot, right? Like, especially you have something that's 3 views deep, right? So this is why I really do like kind of those helpers and like making extensions and categories, because you can shortcut stuff and then you train your eye, be like, oh wait, yeah, my activate call is missing, or and you just kind of maybe get better at that. That's helped out. But like, I for sure am someone who's totally like, had to run something 3 times to see a view on the screen, and like, and I don't think that I will ever not do that. Like, I think it's just, yeah, that's just, I think, life, unfortunately.
I think your advice about stacking your code as it looks on the screen is helpful. Not that you're gonna, necessarily see those errors, but I think when someone else looks at your code and they can kind of look and see like, oh, there's this view, it's supposed to be on top, and just the way I think that's a good.
I think it's really important on a code base that if you're on a team, that there has to be an idiomatic way that your code base works. And it doesn't have to be what Apple says. It doesn't have to be what some some dude at some NSMeetup told you to do. But instead, it just has to be your team has to decide, like, what does a view look like? What does a view controller? How's a view controller structured? And you've got to determine that in your team and write that in your wiki, because that really helps out. So when you're going to a file like this and you're going to something out, like, you can get to where you need to fix and you can fix it. So
actually, in the vein of the last question, I was wondering if you ever used IB to mock up your constraints to kind of like put some dummy views and see like how they might fit together.
Early on, actually, when we were kind of playing with stack views, I was doing that a lot, because we had an engineer during the team and it was like, hey, you guys use stack views? And we were like, no. And that's one of the things I love about new engineers joining my team, is that, like, people bring something to the table. So yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I kind of it would be kind of cool if maybe like storyboard or playgrounds kind of maybe had some kind of like UI type thing. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, like for stack views done that, for constraints have done that. Yeah, but sometimes it's been like 6 months since I've opened it, so I'm pretty confused and don't know what I'm doing.
Wait, what do you think about IP designable and inspectable?
I think those are those are great improvements by Apple that they were trying to fix. I think that was Apple listening to developer feedback and radars and people's angry tweets, I'm sure. And I think those were, because a big step, like years ago, you would open up a NIV file, a storyboard, and you just see UI view. That's like, what's the point, right? Like, you just have like a bunch of views. So I think you're definitely good things. Have I ever used them in practice? No, I don't. So I don't know the drawbacks. I'm sure there are, but I hear good things, and I think it's like a good step that Apple shows that they're committed to using this or doing this stuff.
So do you end up making a lot of drawings when you're doing it, or how do you actually like synthesize these, or do you just think in code?
That's a good question. I think now I kind of. So one thing that helps out a lot is making sure you have a good kind of a question, kind of what Brandon said earlier about like kind of frameworks, but also making sure that like you have consistent tooling, like that, like you might have like stuff for like your labels, right? Like if you do a lot of labels, it might be good in your project to subclass that and make sure you have some really good sensible defaults on that stuff. So you can kind of like, you have these like previews ready to go that you can kind of stick in. And then kind of as I'm doing it, yeah, I'm just like, we use Zeppelin, which I don't know how many people use Zeppelin. Great tool. It allows the designers to like press a button and in Sketch and it magically comes to your screen and you can like, see everything. Great tool. So I kind of just go from there and like, and then kind of just like look at this and be like, okay, we got this and this and this. And like, so kind of just going through my mind. But yeah, I guess now I guess, and this is why going back to kind of like always having a consistent way of laying out constraints, like thinking like, top, trailing, bottom, leading, and you kind of just think like that. And I think that really helps out. So you're grounded and you're like, okay, do we need anything on top? Nope. Do we need anything on trailing? Nope. And like kind of go through that. That I find can help like the process. One more.
I just like the title of your talk because it does feel like you're spending a lot of time with storyboards and auto layout, and it's a relationship you're investing in, but you're not sure if it's really worth it anymore.
I mean, and that's why I kind of was trying to go with this talk, because I hope that like it's somewhat bitter because I mean, it would be in a perfect world, this stuff would be amazing, right? In a perfect world, like it would be like, in a perfect world, I would work at a shop where a designer could use this stuff, right? I hear about that, like there are these mythical designers out there that can like use Interface Builder. If you hear them, like if you hear about these people, like pay them as much money as possible because they do not exist. But like yeah, like you hear about this stuff, right? Like and but kind of then it's like it's not you. You're doing great work. Like I love all the stuff you're doing. Like IB Designable, like that was great. Like but yeah, it's me. Like so. All right. Well, I think we still have a lot of beer to drink, so I'm gonna just kind of I'm gonna wrap stuff up. Feel free to come up and talk to me, and ask me any other questions or comments or whatever. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it, and thank you so much.